Hey, how's it going, everybody? Charlie Wilson here, aka Sinister Charlie. Welcome back. We got some more Fat Electrician. World War II vets versus corrupt cops. I've never heard of the Battle of Athens, Tennessee, but I would imagine it's going to get pretty wild. I like these kind of stories. Who was the family that got like all shot up by the FBI and the ATF on that Ruby Ridge? That's I thought of a ridge. That's how I remembered. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and like it. Please like and subscribe if you would like to. Okay, go.
Yes, the only successful armed rebellion in U.S. history.
Quack.
Today we're talking about the Battle of Athens, aka the Battle of the Ballads, aka the War of McMinn County, whatever you want to call it. The fact of the matter is that in 1945 and 1946, hundreds of Americans returned home to McMinn County, Tennessee after winning World War II. Upon their return, they would discover that their local government had been corrupted. They were engaging in rigging elections. The sheriff's department was mercilessly beating innocent civilians and extorting hundreds of thousands of dollars from taxpayers, and they decided to do something about it. This story has achieved legendary status, with many people hearing and knowing about it in passing, but very few people understand how epic this story actually is. But you're going to learn today, right after a word from our sponsor.
All right.
This video is brought to you by Sundays for Dogs. Look, we're not going to overcomplicate this. It's basically fancy dog food that you don't have to keep like in a can, so you don't need a can opener. You don't have to put it inside of your fridge. It's made with real meat and a bunch of other stuff, so it actually kind of looks and smells like beef jerky. And I don't know.
We sit through ads around here, just letting you know.
I don't know. The dog eats it and it doesn't make his shit weird. So
who knows?
I don't
Maybe
know
you'll
what else
like
you want
something
from
to
dog
see.
food. I'm gonna be honest. This actually might just be beef jerky.
Oh, why'd you do that? That's probably not.
Yeah,
beef
it's
jerky.
pretty much beef jerky.
Is it? Is it?
It's not bad.
All right.
Anyways, for legal reasons, I can't recommend that you eat dog food, but it is technically made with human-grade ingredients, and if we're being honest, it tastes better than pretty much every vegetarian MRE option I've ever had. So if you want to check it out, I'll have a link in the discount code down below. Let's get back to the video.
That's true. Crump.
All right, sit down, shut up. This is complicated, so pay attention.
All
All
right.
right, our story begins in 1910 when a man by the name of Edward Crump becomes the mayor of Memphis, Tennessee. Upon becoming mayor, he sets out to build a political...
So you look like a movie character. Look at that.
Edward Crump becomes the mayor of
That's
Memphis,
awesome.
Tennessee. Upon becoming mayor, he sets out to build a political machine. The way he does this is he's willing to look the other way for illegal gambling and alcohol operations as long as they're willing to pay a large protection fee to Mayor Crump. He then uses that money to influence other elections, effectively having all the other politicians and judges and elected officials in his back pocket. Anybody that dares to go against him is absolutely crushed. If you're a local businessman and you don't agree with him and you're not willing to play by his rules, guess what? You're gonna have no parking signs in front of your entire store.
Get
If that's
crumped.
not enough, on one occasion, he actually had the police department stand outside somebody's store and search every customer when they went in and when they left. And if that wasn't enough, he would have city inspectors go in and find out that, oh, your business isn't up to code, we're gonna have to shut you down. And more often than not, there was no legal recourse because he owned the judges too. Over the course of decades, this would expand throughout the entire city of Memphis and then the entire Shelby County area, the most populated county in Tennessee, and then it would spread throughout the entire state of Tennessee. By the late 1920s, Crump was literally known as Boss Crump, the king of Memphis.
Awesome.
Some type of pimp?
I mean, look at him. He even looks like a 1930s silent movie villain.
I
Anyways,
say,
by
that's
the
what I
1930s,
said.
Crump has essentially the entire state of Tennessee in his back pocket. Absolutely everybody. Politicians, sheriffs, elected officials, judges, all of it. And in 1936, he backs a man by the name of Paul Cantrell to be the sheriff of McMinn County. Now, Paul Cantrell wins by a landslide, A, because he's backed by Crump, but B, he also runs on a really, really good platform that he was gonna put an end to fee grabbing. Now, at this point in time, the sheriff's department wasn't paid by taxpayer dollars. They were almost exclusively paid for by the fines that they collected. Now, that sounds crazy to us today because it is crazy for obvious reasons. You are now putting a financial incentive to law enforcement to arrest and fine as many people as possible. And in a lot of places, that's exactly what happened. So Cantrell came along and he was like, I'm going to put an end to that because it's obviously ridiculous, which is a good thing to want to put an end to. He said, you know what? I'm going to take a $5,000 a year annual salary and that's going to be it. And I'm only going to fine and charge people and arrest people when they deserve it. And I'm not going to do it to make more money. That's a great platform and a just cause. So he wins. And then after winning, he decides,
Nah.
I'm not going to do that.
I lied.
So the McMinn County government steps
That's how
in
it
and is
goes.
like, no, you ran on that platform. We're going to go ahead and make it a law that you're going to take this $5,000 a year salary, just like you said you would, and that's going to be that. So Cantrell ends up filing a lawsuit suing the county, and he wins because he's backed by Crump. So now he's allowed to keep fee grabbing, and he takes it to an absolute extreme. Anybody that was arrested for anything was charged a minimum of $16, and that was the fee for getting arrested, getting driven to court, being booked, going through the whole process. $6 went to the arresting officer, and the other 10 went into the sheriff's department and the court system. To put it into perspective, $16 at this point in time is about $300 today.
Jeebus.
And they were arresting anyone for anything they felt like, including drunkenness. They would literally just walk somewhere and be like, hey, you look drunk, you're under arrest.
Sounds a lot like weed, the way cops deal with that. It's kind of gross.
This was the 1930s. There's no
Gross.
breathalyzer. There's no field sobriety test. Literally, the deputy says, I think you're drunk. Guess what? You're fucking drunk. Give me $300. In the first 4 years he was sheriff, Cantrell paid himself $56,000, which is over $1 million in today's money. He also gave himself jobs that didn't exist. He was the superintendent of the county shed, earning him $2,500 a year. There was no county shed for him to be the superintendent of, but guess what? He's collecting the money. And anybody that dared to go against him would get brutally beaten, if not killed, by his deputies, and they never got in trouble because the judges were part of the good old boy system. One of the primary judges involved in this was Judge Sue Hicks. And to be fair, Sue Hicks has almost nothing to do with the rest of the story, so why am I bringing him up in the first place? Well, because he's actually the inspiration for the legendary Johnny Cash song, A Boy Named Sue, and I thought that was interesting.
Oh, okay. Word up.
My name is Sue. How do you do? Are you gonna die?
Anyways, moving on. Now, this goes on for years. The entire town's mad about it. Everybody's pissed off, but there's nothing anybody can do. There's no legal recourse, and if they try to stand up to him, they're just gonna get the shit kicked out of them by the deputies, so everybody just kind of lives with it. But hey, the silver lining, we live in a democracy. A couple years from now,
kinda.
we're just gonna have another election, and we'll vote this guy
Kinda.
out. We'll get a new sheriff, and hopefully that'll be a good guy. Well, next election rolls around, and they rigged the entire thing. Now, at this point in time in Tennessee, they had a poll tax. Basically, you had to pay money if you wanted to exercise your right to vote,
that's
which
messed
sounds
up.
crazy to us today,
Yeah.
but that's how it worked back then. And it also wasn't that big of a deal at this point in time because usually the Democrat and Republican parties were willing to pay the poll taxes for the voters to show up and vote. So basically, the party was fronting the bill for people to come in and vote. But the problem was is that you had to go pay your poll tax prior to the day of voting. So you had to go pay your poll tax and then have the valid receipt showing that you paid your poll tax and turn that in when you went to vote. But you had to pay that poll tax like months in advance. So what they would do is they would never publish or put out to the masses when the deadline to pay your poll tax was, unless you were in the know and they knew how you were going to be voting. Then they
Okay.
would let you know, hey, you got to buy your poll tax by this time. So they were essentially disenfranchising anybody that wasn't on their side. On top of that, dead people voted. People that didn't exist
Well, I
voted.
mean-
The deputies got
I mean, it's kind of happened all throughout human history, right? With voting. It's, I don't
caught
know.
telling elderly people that if they didn't, quote, vote the right way, that their pensions would be held up. They also claimed that there was
Jeebus.
1,500 absentee votes, which was a staggering number considering the neighboring county, Knox County, that had 6 times the population, had never reported more than 600 absentee ballots. In addition to that, nobody was allowed to observe or poll watch, and if they tried, they would get the shit kicked out
This
of
is
them by
crazy.
the deputies, and then they'd get arrested. So Cantrell obviously wins the next election because he rigged the entire thing. The people of McMinn County know that this is absolute bullshit. They're writing their state and federal politicians. The Department of Justice ends up launching an investigation in 1940. Nothing ever comes of it because Crump has connections in the federal government too. 1941 rolls around. Japan fucks around with America's boats. America enters World War II, and all the young men go off to war. Then in 1942, Cantrell decides his sheriff gig is too small for him. He's going to run for Tennessee State Senate, and he's going to appoint his right-hand man, Pat Mansfeld, to be the sheriff. Now, Cantrell is running against an incumbent politician, and this guy knows the ropes. He knows that Crump owns the entire state of Tennessee, and he knows that he's going to be backing Cantrell. So he pretty much immediately just drops out of the race, and Cantrell runs unopposed.
I worked on a congressional campaign in California back in 2012. I never seen anything like this. We mostly just got drunk all the time. So that was fun. Go work on a political campaign if you ever get the chance. It's a lot of fun.
The incumbent senator that dropped out of the race, a man by the name of Robert Lindsay, when asked why he didn't put up a fight, said, and I quote, "I have been elected to state senate from McMahon, Bradley, Roane, and Anderson counties for 3 terms, each time by fair and honest methods. I might be elected again, but if I do so, it would be necessary for my friends in Bradley, Roane, and Anderson to resort to the same kinds of methods my opposition has convinced me it will use in McMahon. I do not intend to use such methods." Translation: I can't win unless I cheat, and I'm not gonna cheat. So Cantel wins, becomes a state senator. From here, he goes about making it even easier to cheat in elections. What he does in McMinn County is he cuts it from 23 precincts, 23 voting locations throughout the county, down to 12, making it so people have to travel up to 20 miles to go vote.
Jesus.
Bear in mind, this is the 1940s in rural Tennessee. People don't have cars, okay? People are walking to voting locations. They're riding fucking horses, okay? Would you travel 20 miles on horseback or walk 20 miles to go vote in a sheriff's election? Probably not.
Of course I would.
Especially if you had to pay money and you didn't know when you had to pay the money and you don't have the fucking receipt.
If I ain't getting down there, it ain't worth it.
In addition to that, now that he's cut it down to 12 precincts instead of 23, now he can have more armed thugs there to intimidate people as they go to vote to make sure they're voting the right way. From here, 1942 election rolls around. They rig the entire thing. Pat Mansfield wins. DOJ investigates, comes up with nothing. 2 years later, same exact thing. 1944, they rig the election. DOJ investigates. Nothing gets done.
Uh-oh.
September 25th, 1944, a Navy Seabee by the name of Earl Ford comes back home to make...
We got the Seabees representing, huh? Got the Seabees. I was in the Seabees, if you guys don't know, because I endlessly told you, like, every day. But yeah, yeah, that's crazy. Got Seabee stories, huh? All right.
September 25th, 1944, a Navy Seabee by the name of Earl Ford comes back home
That's
to
funny.
McMinn County. He's in his Navy uniform still, just got home from the war, and he decides he's going to go out to the bar and have a good time in his military uniform. Now, to a normal person like you and me in 1944, seeing somebody in their Navy uniform coming home to the bar, you would probably think in your head, oh, it's a war hero coming home from the war. That's what a normal, sane, decent person would think. But
Sure.
to the deputies of McMinn County, all they saw was dollar signs because they know that he
Oh,
probably has a ton of
no.
money because he's been racking up and saving the entire time he was in military service, and they're gonna arrest him and fine the shit out of him so they can make money. Upon leaving the bar, several deputies decide that they are going to engage Earl by hitting him in the back of the head with a club.
What
Not
the-
like, hey sir, why don't you come here so we can talk? Not, hey, I think you're drunk in public. No words were exchanged. They just hit him in the head. Obviously, he's dazed, doesn't know what's going on. He turns around and tries to put up a fight and, I don't know, maybe defend himself like any normal person would, not exactly resisting arrest when they open up by attacking you, at which point they draw a gun, shoot him in the chest,
Holy
and
shit.
kill him.
What the
Obviously,
fuck?
this upsets a lot of people in town that they just killed a young man coming home from the war, at which point the deputies claim that he pulled a knife on them and tried to stab him, and they were forced to shoot him. None of the witnesses that were there corroborated that. He was in a Navy uniform that didn't have pockets, so they don't know
Yeah.
where he would be able to conceal.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that Navy, especially the Cracker Jacks, they don't have. You have a little front pocket, but it's like there's no zipper. It's just all buttons and stuff. Yeah, that doesn't make much sense, does it?
Steal a knife. And when they asked where the knife was after the fact, after shooting him in the chest, somehow the knife that he would have had in his hand trying to stab the police officer allegedly wound up behind him and underneath his dead body. And of course, the deputies get away with it. The deputy that shot him didn't even get fired or reprimanded because he's one of the boys of the political system, and that's the way this shit works.
We make our own luck.
1945 rolls around. World War II comes to a
Jeez,
close.
okay.
All of the young men from McMinn County that went off and fought all end up coming home. And the deputies just see more and more dollar signs, right? Anytime you see a young man between like 18 to 25, that guy served in the military, probably has a bunch of money. When World War II veterans left the service, they got mustering out pay, one big lump sum, so they know that they can just arrest these guys and fine the shit out of them and make a ton of money. One of the first veterans to have a run-in with the deputies is Sergeant Bill White from the United States Marine Corps. This man fought on Guadalcanal and Tarawa, and then after that went on to become a jungle warfighter warfare instructor stateside. His dad sends him
Nice.
over to the rationing board because it's World War II, just got over. They still have all these rationing committees. They're rationing rubber, sugar, gasoline, all kinds of things that people need. You have to have ration stamps, and everybody's only allowed to get so much. So dad sends his son Bill down to the rationing board to get 5 gallons of gas. Rationing board is like, no. And Bill's like, all right. So he goes to his buddy who had been in town longer and is like, hey, the rationing board basically just told me to fuck off when I wanted to get some gas. What's the deal? And he goes, oh, there's a deputy at the rationing board. You need to go pay him off, and then he'll wave you through on the
Oh
rationing
my
board. He'll give you
God.
whatever you want. So Bill goes over to the deputy, pays him $5. Deputy waves it off. He gets his 5 gallons of gas and he leaves. And Bill watches the deputy pocket the money. Bill has no idea what the fuck just happened. He's thrown off. So he goes home and tells his dad, who was a Cav scout in World War I, this story. And his dad's like, yeah, that's just how it is here now. And his dad proceeds to tell him this
Is this the plot of Walking Tall? Because it feels like it.
story about how he was on lunch break from work and he had a bottle of milk that he was drinking out of his lunch pail, and the deputy showed up, sniffed his milk and said there was alcohol in it, and arrested him for being drunk and fined him $16, which was almost a week's pay for him. So Bill's pretty pissed off, obviously, and within a matter of months, pretty much every veteran that had returned home from the war was equally as pissed off because they were all being targeted by the sheriff's department because they knew that they had money. The deputies got so bold that they would go into bars, not wait outside for them to stagger out drunk. They would just go into bars and start arresting people for being drunk inside of a bar. On multiple occasions, they would walk into a bar if there was like a dance or a big event and just arrest absolutely everybody there. Not because they were doing anything wrong, just because they wanted to get the money. So the veterans understandably started to get pretty pissed off, and they would just start drinking in private. They'd have their own private parties that the deputies didn't know about so they could hang out with their friends in peace and not get arrested all the time. So all the veterans obviously wound up becoming really close friends. They all got together, they'd drink in private, they'd swap war stories. There's a guy by the name of John Fry who said he became the most powerful man in France for a couple weeks when his unit overtook a cognac distillery and he had all the liquor in France. So he was like, you know, the most powerful guy around, wheeling and dealing with all of his booze. Carl Anderson told the story about how a German officer threatened to cut his finger off when he refused to give him his wedding ring. Tom Dooley would always bring his pet monkey that he acquired while he was overseas and somehow smuggled back home to Tennessee. Like, it was just a group of crazy, incredible men that had awesome stories that wound up becoming friends and bonded over the fact that they were all being discriminated against for their service. And as time went on, they went from drinking and discussing war stories to talking about the current political climate and how to fix it. And as they talked to townspeople, they started to realize, oh, they're literally rigging the elections. They rigged 1942, 1944, and they're probably going to rig this next one in 1946. We need to do something. So they went to the only political opposition that the Cantel Mafia had, a man by the name of Otto Kennedy, a local businessman that owned the tire shop in town, and he agreed to help him, and his tire shop became their new hangout. Leading up to the 1946 election, this group of veterans put out an ad in the paper reaching out to more veterans, basically saying if you were a veteran, and I quote, regardless of color or creed, if interested in cleaning up McMinn County and the return of good, clean, honest, and efficient government, don't fail to attend this.
I imagine this event isn't going to go over very well. Just a thought, a feeling I have.
Event. Hundreds of veterans winded up showing up to this event, and they essentially pitched the idea to this crowd of veterans like, hey, look, regardless of whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or the color of your skin, we can all agree that this is fucked up and we need to restore order. We should band together and form a GI ticket, and we will run against Cantel and all of his men and replace all of them. And they all agreed, and they picked their candidates. Sergeant Henry Knox, who had served 40 months overseas, agreed that he would run for sheriff. Major Frank Carmichael volunteered to run as treasurer. Captain Bill Hamby was going to be the clerk of the court, and Captain Charlie Pickle was going to be the register of deeds. They had just
Charlie Pickle, that's such a good name. That's good.
selected the GI cleanup ticket, and their slogan was going to be, your vote will be
Man, that should have been my YouTube name. That's a good name.
counted as cast. And they chose that as their slogan because they knew they didn't need to win over the voters. Those voters would vote for anybody that wasn't part of this corrupt political machine. And the real struggle was going to be convincing the voters to show up and vote, because by this point in time, over the course of the last decade, they'd been so demoralized into knowing that no matter what happens, they're going to rig the election, they're going to take my money. If I show up, I'm just going to get harassed by armed gunmen and arrested, and then I'm going to have a target on my back. I'm just not even going to go vote. That was the real struggle obstacle. That was the hurdle they needed to overcome, was convincing the populace of McMinn County that this time democracy was going to work. They were not going to let them rig this election. These young men went across the world and fought for democracy and won, and now they came back home. They're going to fight for it again, and they're going to win again. And the veterans went absolutely ham trying to prove this to every single person in McMinn County. They literally went to every single door in the entire county and had personal conversations with every single person. Almost every person in McMinn County had personally met at least one member on the GI ticket and spoke to them in person. Felix had acquired a Piper Cub airplane somehow, and they were literally crop dusting pamphlets over the town for the GI ticket. They had trucks rigged up with loudspeakers, and they would drive around town telling everybody, show up, vote, your vote is gonna count this time. And after a while, it started to work. People started to believe that their vote was actually gonna count this time, so they went, they paid the poll tax, they got their receipt, and what the deputies did in retaliation was they would go out and they would arrest veterans, and when they arrested them, if they had their poll tax receipt on them, they would confiscate it and not give it back so they couldn't vote. So they started reaching out to the bigger government. They wrote to the governor, they wrote to the attorney general, they wrote to Washington, D.C. One person even went as far as to tell the attorney general, if there's bloodshed this year, it's on your hands. And nobody did anything. As the election got closer and closer, there was really no campaigning from the machine side. They just upped the amount of harassment the deputies were doling out to veterans and anybody they thought might be friendly to those veterans. That's all they did. They were just in it to make more money. Why did they need to campaign? They were going to rig the election. They knew they were going to win. But they were starting to get a little bit nervous. So Paul Cantrell would step down from Senate, and he was going to come back to McMinn County, and he was going to run for sheriff this year. And his right-hand man, Mansfield, was going to take his spot in the Senate. And then election day came, August 1st, 1946. And you got to realize it's just a small sheriff's department. They've only got like 30 deputies. There's hundreds of veterans. The veterans guaranteed that everybody would be safe going to the polls, and these armed thugs aren't going to be able to outmuscle the veterans. There's just not enough of them. And then a literal caravan of cars came into McMinn County and Athens, Tennessee. Cantrell had brought in over 250 armed men, any men that he could find, other deputies from other counties, police departments, prison guards. They even deputized some prisoners, a lot of which were literally violent criminals. At this point, the veterans know shit's about to hit the fan because Cantrell now has 250 armed men manning the 12 precincts. They are gonna intimidate absolutely everybody. So the GIs got together and issued a statement over the radio to the people of McMinn County. Quote, go to your precincts, vote, and stick around all day to hear who wins.
Pretty sure that was a firework.
This is not old Germany. Hitler is not telling you how to vote. Don't be bothered by any scare campaign. Cantrell's henchmen may try. You will be safe at the polls, and your vote will be counted as cast. The polling locations open up at 9 a.m., and in Athens, Tennessee, the county seat where most of the voting is going to be taking place, there's 3 voting locations, the Dixie Cafe, the Waterworks, and the courthouse. And at every single location, there is hundreds of people standing outside at 9 a.m. waiting to vote. Lines literally wrapping around the block. This is going to be a record-breaking election. And as soon as the polls open, shit hits the fan immediately. The armed thugs are intimidating everybody. They're only letting people in small groups so they have control and intimidation. They're not letting anybody stick around to poll watch to make sure things are being done correctly. They're actively rigging the election, and everybody knows it. And then one of the deputies by the name of WWII decides he's not going to let an elderly black gentleman by the name of Tom Gillespie vote. Tom isn't putting up with it. He's put up with enough shit his whole life. He's a black guy in the 1940s in the South. Like, he's seen some shit. He's not putting up with shit from this deputy. So he's like, no, I'm going to vote. It's my right. He goes to do it, and WWII proceeds to assault him with brass knuckles, and the situation devolves to him shooting Tom Gillespie. Now shit has officially hit the fan. Thank God Tom Gillespie survives, but that's not the point. The veterans said that you would be safe if you showed up and exercised your right as a citizen to vote, and these guys have now made the veterans a liar.
Really? We'll fix that.
So the 2 veteran poll watchers that were there at the Waterworks when Tom was shot, Ed Vastel and Charlie Scott, confront the deputies. They end up arresting them and bringing them into the Waterworks and tying them up. Other veterans start showing up, demanding that they release the veteran poll watchers. Guns start getting pointed, at which point Ed and Scott decide, you know what? Fuck this, we're gonna free ourselves. They get out of their ropes. Scott throws himself at the glass door, bounces right back off it, hops back up again, throws himself at the glass door again, breaks through, gets all cut up from the glass. Him and Ed run out into the crowd with their hands up, hoping that's enough to not get shot, and disappear into the crowd. Now, obviously, Ed and Scott go back to Otto's tire shop, the GIHQ, and they're hanging out there. So Cantrell sends in 2 deputies to the tire shop, which is full of fucking World War II veterans, to arrest Scott and Ed.
No.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
The veterans immediately and promptly disarm the deputies, beat the fucking shit out of them, tie them up, and throw them on a burn pile. Sheriff's Department, getting curious, doesn't hear from their deputies for a while, so what do you do when something doesn't
Send
work?
more
Double
deputies.
tap. You do it again, right? They send 2 more deputies out to investigate.
What a stupid son of a bitch.
Promptly disarmed, get the shit kicked out of them, tied up, thrown on the burn pile with the other 2. Sheriff's Department doesn't hear from those guys for a while.
Send
That's
some
fucking
more.
weird. Maybe we should send some more sheriffs out there to investigate.
Double it!
So they send a total of 4 deputies now out to a building full of World War II veterans in 1946. 3 of them get captured, disarmed, get the shit kicked out of them, and thrown on the burn pile, and 1 of them gets away. Cutting over to Otto Kennedy, he's been out of
This
town
is
all day
awesome.
trying to get the federal government or
I'm
the
loving
state
this.
government to intervene to fix this situation. He shows back up to his tire shop. He sees 7 deputies tied up on a burn pile, and he's like, what the fuck is happening? The veterans explain everything, and he's like, nope, I'm fucking out. I didn't see anything. I don't know shit. I'm going home. You guys do whatever. The veterans then walk outside, basically onto Main Street in Athens. There's people all over the place, hundreds of people from McMinn County all around watching these events unfold. And they're just like, hey, who's got a couple of cars we could borrow? And these people are like, they're on the GI's side. So people volunteer to let them take their cars. They then proceed to load these 7 deputies up into these cars, drive them out into the forest, strip them butt-ass naked, tie them to trees, whip them with hickory sticks, and then head back to the tire shop.
Word
7
up.
down, 243 to go.
I'm sorry. Ow! Ah! I hate you. You're awful.
And while that was going on at a different polling location, the deputies had arrested 2 veteran poll watchers, Bob Harold and Tom Dooley, because they confronted the deputies for letting people vote that didn't have poll tax receipts and even letting small children vote. They promptly beat up both the veterans and took them to jail. At this point, shit has completely hit the fan. There's journalists there with cameras. The deputies are arresting journalists. They're confiscating cameras. They're destroying film.
Wow.
They are in full cover-up mode to rig this election. From here, the deputies illegally close the polls early. Then they refuse to let anybody examine any of the ballots in the ballot boxes. They come out with a bunch of men with shotguns and high-powered rifles, and they take the ballot boxes into the jail, and they're not going to let anybody watch the count. And at this point, there's the aura of failure everywhere. They failed. They're going to go in there. They're going to count. They're going to mess up the count. They're going to rig the count. They're going to rig this election again. The veterans failed after they guaranteed votes would be counted as cast, and there's nothing they can do about it. So the veterans go back to the tire shop. They go back to HQ, and they sit there and they wait. They just have to wait for the count to come out. They know what the results are going to be, but they wait. The townspeople are out on Main Street in Athens. They're waiting too, and it's just quiet. It's ominous. They lost. And then finally, Bob White stands up, the one from earlier, the Marine that fought in Tarawa and Guadalcanal. He's got a Purple Heart from being shot through the hip in combat. He is a jungle warfare instructor in the United States Marine Corps, and he's had enough of this shit. He stands up and delivers an impromptu speech, and I'm paraphrasing, but in essence, he essentially says, you all went overseas for 4 or 5 years of your lives and fought tyranny across an ocean, and now you're all just gonna sit here in silence and live in tyranny in your own home. We're not gonna put up with this shit. Go home, get your guns, and
Sounds a lot like Animal House. There's a lot of movie references.
meet back here.
Hell yeah.
Veterans get up, they go home, they come back with their guns. It's not much. They've got some hunting shotguns, hunting rifles, pistols, not nearly enough to confront the 55 armed deputies inside of that jail in a fortified fighting position. At which point, Bob decides, we're gonna need some more firepower. From here, they get up and they head over to the National Guard Armory. There's one guy from the
Alright.
National Guard there holding down the fort. They show up with guns and they're like, fork over the keys. He's more than happy to do it, gives them the keys. They go in, open up the armory, take a bunch of rifles, Tommy guns, pistols, ammo, everything they want. From here, the accounts vary widely on how many armed veterans were there. Bob White said he had about 60 men under his command, but there's some people saying that there was hundreds. There's even a couple accounts saying that there was as many as 2,000 armed veterans. I think that person was thinking the overall crowd in general, because the whole town is there watching. From here, the deputies go out, they completely surround the jail, the sun's going down, so they shoot out all the street lights so that the deputies aren't gonna be able to see where they're at.
Word
Then
up.
they get keys to all the surrounding buildings, and the people of the town are willingly just giving them the keys because, like, they're overthrowing the corrupt government. Why wouldn't you help? The veterans are up on top of roofs, they're in windows, they're in all the buildings surrounding this jail. They have the entire thing on lockdown. Now, by this point, the deputies know something's up. Some of them are outside in front of the jail. They're completely surrounded by armed veterans. There's fucking 1,000 civilians watching in the background, at which point one of the veterans chimes in and is like, bring the ballot boxes out. We're gonna count them all right here, right now. We're gonna see who won this election. To which the deputies respond, you're gonna have to come get them.
All right.
Get them!
At which point the veterans respond, all right. And
See,
all you
told you.
hear is safeties on guns click
Nice.
off as all the deputies hear that. They run and dive for cover, and the veterans open fire on the jail. Some of the deputies get hit. They're hiding behind cars, limping for cover. The rest of the deputies run inside the jail and take cover. They start returning fire. All the civilians are scattering in the background, not really leaving the scene. They're trying to find somewhere safe because they also want to watch this shit unfold, and it's just chaos. From here, a pretty intense firefight ensues, but the jail's basically impenetrable. It's made out of brick. All the veterans are
All
behind
right.
covers. Not a lot of people are getting hit, but some people are getting hit by ricochets, birdshot, other things like that. As this firefight unfolds, the townspeople kind of get acclimated to being in a firefight, I guess, and get a little bit more brazen and start watching a little bit closer. Some of them take it upon themselves to go and vandalize all of the cop cars and overturn them. Veterans are flipping cars for more cover. It's just a complete shit show. After a while, the initial firefight dies down and it just kind of devolves into a standoff where they're taking pop shots at each other back and forth. Inside the jail, Cantrell and Mansfield are shitting their pants. They're on the phone. They're calling up the National Guard. The National Guard's getting ready to mobilize. They call the sheriff of Polk County asking for backup. He promptly responds, what are you, fucking crazy? No, get out of here. You did this to yourself. I'm not gonna go fight
That's
a bunch
funny.
of World War II veterans. No. So Mansfield calls Otto Kennedy. Kennedy picks up the phone, and Mansfield, still trying to sound tough, is like, Otto, your boys are down here shooting up the jail. You need to come get them or we're gonna take care of them. To which Otto responds, all right, go get him. Hangs up.
Nice.
He just hung up on me mid-sentence.
One of the veterans ends up finding out that the National Guard got called and they're gonna mobilize, so he notifies the ringleader, Bob White, and Bob White is like, all right, first things first, we're gonna go cut the phone line to the jail so they can't do that shit again. Also, don't tell anybody else. It's gonna take hours for him to get here. I don't need you making everybody scared. Keep that shit under wraps. From here,
That's
Bob's
pretty
kind of like,
good
okay,
idea.
well, National Guard's gonna show up eventually. We should probably hurry this shit up. We should have a couple of hours. Let's go get some gasoline and some glass bottles and make us some Molotov cocktails.
There you
See if
go.
we can't convince them to leave the jail. So the veterans make Molotov cocktails, throw them at the jail. It's a brick building, not very effective. Fire burns out, not a big deal. At which point, one of the veterans is like, I work for the county and we got dynamite in the county
Nice.
shed. You want me to go get it? Fuck yeah, I do. While they're going to get the dynamite, they go and start rendering aid to some of the deputies that have been shot. I mean, they've been laying there for a couple hours, moaning and groaning at this point. One of the veterans actually gives a direct blood transfusion to the deputy.
That's
despite
crazy.
the fact that he's, you know, the enemy. It's not really his enemy. He's just doing what he has to do. And I think this is a cool part of the story where it's like, the veterans didn't want to do this. They were driven to do this. They want to cause as little damage as possible, and they're still caring about their enemy. Around the same point in time, an ambulance pulls up to start rendering aid. The veterans are thinking, okay, they've got some, you know, injured people inside the building or whatever. We're gonna let them get their injured out because, you know, we're trying to do the right thing. We're good guys. And sure enough, Paul Cantrell and Mansfield take the opportunity to slip inside the ambulance and make
what
a
a
clean
bunch of
getaway,
bitches.
leaving all their henchmen behind. Nobody really realizes that at the time. The ambulance takes off. The dynamite shows up. They then proceed to blow up Mansfield's car.
Nice.
The crowd erupts in cheer. They love this shit. At which point the veterans yell into the jail like, come out or we're gonna start blowing this shit up. They respond with a couple of pop shots. Cool. Band 3 sticks of dynamite together, throw it onto the porch, blow the entire porch off the jail. After the smoke from that settles, the GIs yell in. The next one's coming through the window, at which point the deputies, you know, the boss has already fled. What the fuck am I doing here? They're like, okay, stop shooting. We'll come out.
Good.
The GIs are like, cool, come out with your hands up. We're all good. The deputies all file out with their hands in the air, begging not to get shot, at which point some of the GIs are like, you know, maybe we should shoot them. And the crowd is like, fucking shoot him. The rest of the GIs are like, no, we're not fucking murdering people. Knock it off. So nobody ends up getting shot. Cantrell and Mansfield are missing. They refused to tell him where the hell they went. They found out later that he escaped in the ambulance.
God damn it!
Now at this point, you gotta remember, there's 2,000 civilians that have been getting the shit kicked out of them for the past 10 years by these deputies and being extorted, and the crowd kind of, moves in and has their chance to return the favor, which they absolutely do. And Wendy Wise, the man that shot the elderly black gentleman earlier, got a special amount of attention.
No. Oh, wow.
The payback's a motherfucker, ain't it?
He did end up surviving, and he later said that there was no hard feelings.
Why would I have hard feelings? I'm still picking pieces of your ass out of my boot.
Good one.
So while that's going on, the veterans go inside the jail. They find a metric fuck ton of ballots that were pre-marked for Paul Cantrell. They find the real ballots. They take the real ballots out. They pick trustworthy people. They have them go count them. Then they continue searching the rest of the jail. They go back to where the actual jail cells are. There's 3 veterans in there. They break them out. And then there's 2 other people. One guy that got picked up the night before for being too drunk, and another guy that was in there for burglary, that have apparently just been having the worst time of their fucking lives. They had no idea what was going on.
Okay.
The entire time.
Stop blowing holes in my shit!
So now the ballots are getting counted. They take all the deputies back into the jail, throw their asses in jail cells, and wait for the ballots to get counted. The results come in, the real results, and every GI won in a fucking landslide.
Oh, yeah.
From here, the crowd goes fucking nuts. It's a huge celebration. Everybody's happy. They've finally overthrown the corrupt government. The day is saved. After that, settles down a little bit, a lawyer chimes in and is like, okay, we can't fucking talk about any of this shit, by the way.
I don't have a clue what you're talking about, Phil. Not a fucking clue.
At this point, everybody's like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, good idea. So not knowing what to do with, the 55 deputies that they had inside of a jail cell, they just kind of took the ones that were messed up to the hospital, let the rest of them go, get the fuck out of our town. All of them, except for Wendy Wise, they kept him in jail, told him they were going to send him to prison as long as they possibly could. And while this is going on, Mansfield and Cantrell end up convincing the mortician in town to smuggle them out of town inside of a hearse, which is symbolic to say the least. Now at this point, it dawns on everybody, the work's not done yet. The National Guard still might be coming. We got to get ready. The whole town is on their side. They don't want the National Guard coming in here overturning what they deem as a just election. They've all got guns, and they're game to go to war with the National Guard to defend their right to vote. It's fucking crazy. Felix Harold takes off, gets in his Piper Cub plane. He's circling the town, conducting aerial reconnaissance, looking at all the roads into Athens and the county as a whole. And he's like, there's no major formations coming near us at all. There's not a single car on the road right now. I think we're good. The governor had already called off the National Guard, but they don't know that yet. They literally have patrols going around town of armed veterans and armed civilians getting ready to throw down for anybody that wants to overturn this election. And this goes on for days, almost a week. The veterans ended up getting word that a neighboring sheriff's department from a neighboring county was gonna send troops in here to do something about it. They're like, fuck it, let's grab a bunch of guys, load them in some trucks, and we'll just drive to their sheriff's department and ask them what's up.
Okay.
Bunch of armed veterans show up, 50 of them outside of the sheriff's department. It was like, hey, we heard you wanted to do something about our election. And the sheriff is like,
Nah.
nope.
No. That's not what I said.
And the veterans are like, okay, great, cool, wonderful. They head back to Athens peacefully. Everything's going fine. Sure enough, U.S. Marshals show up, the feds, they start asking questions. Nobody in town says a fucking thing about anything.
Oh, no, I ain't seen nothing. I ain't seen nothing. Matter of fact, I'm blind in my left eye. I can't even see you, sir.
The U.S. Marshals don't know what to do. Obviously shit went down here, but
That's
nobody's
awesome.
talking. They've got to figure out what the hell happened and what they're going to do about it. And then they get an idea. They're like, hey, they got the guns from somewhere. They had to have gotten all those guns from the National Guard Armory. We're going to go check there. So they show up to the National Guard Armory. Every single gun is there and accounted for. And the National Guard Armory sergeant is like,
I don't know shit about fuck.
At which point the U.S. Marshals are like, okay, these guys they're fucking thorough. I'll give them that. What about the ammunition? They expend ammunition. We know that you keep a running tally of that shit. Is all the ammunition here? To which the National Guard guy is like, no, actually we don't. You see, that's expendable. We don't really keep track of that shit here. It's, it's very complicated and nuanced. No, I don't. I don't have that information either. Sorry. Anyways, have a nice day. The U.S. Marshals are like, I have no fucking idea what to do. I have nothing to go off. So they just kind of fuck off. And then Judge Sue Hicks orders an investigation into every possible crime committed by everybody. The investigation yields absolutely nothing. He even gets the National Guard to conduct an internal investigation as to whether or not the weapons at the armory were used. And the National Guard is like, nope, definitely not used at all. Ultimately, the governor ends up stepping in and is like, okay, just we're done with this. We're moving on. The GIs that won their elected post. Nobody ended up dying. There were no fatalities, just a ton of injuries over this entire thing. We're moving on. The only person that got convicted of anything was Deputy Wendy Wise, who shot Tom Gillespie, and he got sent to prison for 3 years. And now with the new veteran Sheriff Knox, he announced
all right then. Could have been more. Would have been nice.
That he was going to be conducting an investigation into all of the other political officials inside the town of Athens and McMinn County to make sure that they won their elections fairly, at which point all 28 remaining public officials in the county and the town of Athens promptly resigned.
Nice.
You're all fired.
There you go.
The new sheriff's department
just talking about walking tall.
and immediately restored order to the county, with their first 3 arrests actually being veterans that had broken the law, in a true demonstration of, we are not going to be another machine, we're not going to be another corrupt government, we're going to do the right thing. If you do the crime, you're going to do the time, and that's that. In addition to that, they immediately went out and put an end to all the illegal gambling and alcohol rings that had been funding the previous political machine. And that's it. Order had officially been restored to Athens. Everybody lives happily ever after. Hooray. But then word got out to the rest of Tennessee what had happened. And remember, machine politics are going on all over the state. And as word got out with that, you started to see more veterans organizations mobilizing and doing similar things. There were some altercations, nothing to the scale of the Battle of Athens, because, well, nobody wanted to find out because they knew what would happen. They all watched the Battle of Athens occur. And over the course of the coming years, by the early 1950s, the Crump political machine had effectively been completely dismantled, because now they knew if you fuck around too hard, somebody might make you find out. This entire story is just the embodiment of, if we all break the rules together, they can't get all of us in trouble,
stop us
and
all.
I absolutely love it.
Shot a bunch of people and lots of cops. Stuff happened. It was kind of cool. Yeah. Yeah. Is there any kind of ending credits or? Oh, okay.
Good boy, you've come to free me.
Okay. I don't even know what movie that is. Yeah. Anyway, there you go. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Yeah, that was a really good story. That was very engaging. Yeah, and yeah, I had no idea. That's pretty cool. In case that ever happens, get a bunch of veterans together, I guess. They might do something. Yeah, but thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe down below. Makes me feel good inside. Helps out the channel. If you have any recommendations for any other videos, please put them in the comments. I will get to it eventually. So yeah, thank you very much, and bye.